Thanks for listening to the Pop Culture Cosmos and the PCC Multiverse. Check out more great podcasts today on one of these awesome affiliate networks.
You're listening to a Weeby Geeks Network podcast.
You're listening to the ESO Network, your station for all things geek.
The Tangibound Network. Check it out. TangiboundNetwork.com. Listen to this show, the latest episode, every time.
A proud member of the Good and Geek Network. The opinions expressed are those of each individual. Check out all the other geeky podcasts over at GonnaGeekNetwork.com and get ready, because geekiness begins in 3, 2, 1.
Don't be alarmed. The quasi-shimmering light before you is a trans-dimensional gateway to other worlds, other voices, other thoughts, and other realities. Up feels like down, and down feels like the number 7 on a Wednesday morning. Don't worry. That quivering, blood-boiling sensation under your eyebrows is all a part of the charm. Welcome to the PCC Multiverse.
All right, and we're back once again with the Pop Culture Cosmos. It's Gerald Glassford coming right back at you here. And, you know, we talked so much over the past month and a half or so about, you know, the decade that was, and so much went down in pop culture, but we need to look ahead. It's 2020. It's right upon us, and we need to look ahead in the world of pop culture, because pop culture is, you know, it just became such a big thing in the last decade, and it's going to be even bigger in this one. And here to talk with me about what he hopes, and also hopefully what I hope as well for the future of pop culture, is a good man indeed. He is one of the most knowledgeable persons out there when it comes to pop culture. He's a pop culture icon. Okay. I like that. I like the pop culture icon.
Wait, there's somebody else on the show? Who's this person?
There you go. There you go. He is, you know, you got to catch his awesome show, the Jock and Nerd podcast. It's everywhere. It's available everywhere you get your podcasts. It's available everywhere. You can go ahead and you can just check it out. It's all over social media. It's all over as far as where you get your podcast. It's an excellent show. It's full of laughter, fun, pop culture, sports talk. Whatever you want to deal with, it's right there for you. It is definitely great to have him on the show. Finally, it's long overdue. It is Imran Javed. And Imran, I'm just so happy and just ecstatic that you're finally on the program.
Dude, I'm glad we can finally connect. I hear you on Voice from the Underground all the time. I see you in all the Facebook groups. Jason Dutch always speaks highly of you. And that was a crazy intro. Thank you. I thought you were talking about another person you had on the show, but that's me. Hi, guys. What's
exactly.
up?
Well, you know, I've listened to your show many times, and your knowledge of pop culture, you know, it surpasses mine. But I know I get talked about as, you know, the guy, oh, it's the pop culture guy. That's the pop culture guy. You know, if I'm the pop culture guy, we got to call you the pop culture guru. How about that?
Like, that's what happens when you have a sad childhood that's shaped by television and comic books.
Exactly.
I have, my brain is full of useless knowledge, and someday it'll pay off.
But someday it did with. And I'll tell you what, with a side dish of the arcade for me as well.
Yeah.
So.
Oh, yeah. Very important place.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Oh, I miss arcades. But
yeah, they don't really, they don't have many of those left anymore. Gone the way of blockbusters and drive-in movies. It's kind of sad.
Exactly. But it's just so hard to keep them, you know, to afford space and to afford what they do. Now you got to throw a gimmick in there, like it's got to be a bar, or it's got something else got to be attached to it for an arcade.
Dave and Buster's is great, but this game, you're going to charge me $5 for a video game? Get out of here.
Exactly.
I'm not playing this. Yeah, give me the quarter games and the nickel games again.
I'm going to line them up right there.
Yeah.
Right there along there. Yeah, exactly. I got next. But it is indeed so great to talk to you here about the future of pop culture. And, you know, we just said I said before the program, it's going to be a free-flowing conversation about where you want to take it, because, you know, the decades, it's just starting. It's fresh. So I want to hear your thoughts, my friend, where you want to go first in the decade ahead as far as what you hope for in the realm of pop culture.
I jotted down a couple of fun things that I find fascinating, very interesting. And yeah, we had a crazy decade. Like, we're at peak geek culture, possibly the bubble on the verge of bursting. Is it getting thin? Are the edges getting thin? I don't know. I don't think so. This past decade, something that's fascinated me that I think will continue is the streaming wars that has broken out, and the way how people watch TV programming is just completely changed drastically. You know, Netflix goes from being the Hollywood disruptor to now being threatened and disrupted all in a decade. It's a crazy switcheroo. And I think we are right in the middle. You know, this year we had Apple TV Plus and Disney Plus released, two huge ones, obviously two of the biggest generating billion-dollar, trillion-dollar companies ever. But there's more coming. There's Peacock, which is probably the worst named out of all these, NBC.
That's why one of the programs in the tiers is actually going to be free, because they're really going to be trying to be desperate to get you involved in it.
I mean, the jokes write themselves right there, people. Come on. So the names haven't been getting better, but I think what's going to happen, and I've been predicting this, is that this thing goes completely circular, as many trends do, and streaming TV becomes like cable bundled packaging again. And we're right back to the beginning. We're like, okay, if I pay for this, I get all these things. I got to pay for this, I'll get all these things. Because you right now, you can't single subscribe to all these things. It costs just as much as, if not more, than standard cable as it is.
Exactly. And I'm actually, if I get a chance to, at CES coming up, you know, here in a little bit, if I get a chance to go ahead and check out Quibi. I know that's something I've also talked about on my show.
I've heard about that. That's like the short form that's got high talent, but they're going for like 15-minute
8 to 15 minutes. Yeah, very. Yeah, it could be. It's like, let's say, just take a 30-minute program, normally what you would see on TV, or an hour program, and put it in 8-minute bites. So that's something that's intriguing.
Yeah,
it's supposed to be targeting the millennials, not us, but the millennials. Yeah. So, you know,
but this is what I love about this technology, what the potential for this, because you don't, you know, the Mandalorian has shown us they're like 30 to 50-minute episodes. It doesn't need to be a set length. It's just like podcasts. They need to be as long as they need to be. So I think the more people experiment with this, I think it's going to be really interesting. If someone has a season where maybe there's like a 10-minute episode, but there's also like 40, 50-minute episodes. Maybe there's like and it's all the one season. I think that the potential for that is going to be great in the future.
I hope so. And you know, with, like you said, with Mandalorian, that's something from time to time, episode to episode. Sometimes the 40 minutes for me works.
Yeah.
Sometimes it doesn't.
Yeah.
Like, I know the monumentally bashed Tatooine episode. I know a lot of people are just like, that one, you know, is not good for the series. But overall, it's been a great experience. And Baby Yoda, you know, this is the way I have spoken and all that. So It's just been a great time to watch that. But again, you hit it right on the head with the future of what's going on in pop culture lies heavily in this next decade with the streaming technologies. And I guess I will start there with the streaming technologies. And you spoke of some. If you're laying bets, and I'm here in Vegas where we lay a lot of bets, if you're in Vegas, or you're, you know, actually you can pretty much bet anywhere in the United States, but what streaming entities are you relying most on? Or are you going to be talking about most over the course of the next decade, do you think, in your opinion?
Wow. Well, you know, Disney Plus is promising a lot, and they know how to do this right. And they are gutting for Netflix. I think Netflix may be okay. You know, the one thing they have is they have a huge head start on subscribers. They've got like 158 million subscribers.
Exactly.
It's gonna take a while, and they're international. And Disney still, it's gonna roll out international later. It's not everywhere, but of course, Baby Yoda is spoiled for the world. So sorry, Europe and UK, if you don't have it, you should have just I don't know, moved over here.
It's just if they could get that consistent programming beyond The Mandalorian.
Yes, but the nostalgia play with Disney is so heavy, and they're so brilliant at it. Is people are eating this up regardless. Like, they don't care if there's new stuff. So Netflix really has to. And I think Netflix started with The Irishman, showed us that's probably the highest profile release they've had with the best talent. Now, if they could bring more stuff like that, that's going to be interesting. That would keep me paying for the Netflix.
Six Underground with Ryan Reynolds and Michael Bay.
Well, that's maybe not the best example. It was fun, but I mean,
but as far as big name talent is concerned.
Yes. And if any place is going to be like Michael Bay, here's $150 million. Make the Michael Bay-est movie you want. We don't care.
Hey, that's exactly what I said. I said it was Michael Bay to the 10th degree, and that's what Netflix wanted him to do. And you're either going to think it's a great popcorn flick, or it's a fun popcorn flick, or you're going to get a headache. It's just that simple. It's just
It is great, and there's some crazy stuff. I mean, it's not great, but it's fun to watch, and you're just like, oh my god, did they just do that? All right, whatever. Don't think about it too much and enjoy.
But the thing is, in social media that weekend, it garnered so much interest. People want a sequel. People are clamoring for it. So even though it's not one of the critically acclaimed releases, like you said, with The Irishman, The Two Popes, Marriage Story, Dolomite Is My Name.
That's a great movie. Yeah,
those four have really garnered a lot of buzz for Netflix. It's still something that it's like a palate cleanser, and it's for the people that maybe don't want to see those critically acclaimed movies, because it's just like going to the movies in the old days.
Yeah,
you had your during this time of the year, like you have now all the movies that are vying for the coveted Oscars, and then you have the other movies like Jumanji and whatnot that are not going for that. So
that's a good point. They just normalized, like, you forget that these movies like Six Underground, My Name's Dolomite would have run in theaters, but I think more people get a chance now because of what the franchises have done. But looking forward, do not underestimate HBO Max. Warner Brothers has a huge catalog, and you've heard about these overall deals with showrunners like Netflix and Ryan Murphy and Shonda Rhimes, J.J. Abrams, Warner Brothers. Amazon paying $250 million for Lord of the Rings just to make the show, not even the cost of the show. I think these are all going to come into play, and to see what like the Game of Thrones guys can bring to Netflix, and what new IP is created by these huge talented showrunners. That's very exciting.
It is very exciting. And I know I've spoken to individuals in the industry before that were concerned about the death of studios or the dying of studios and whatnot, but I see more studios. In fact, I was seeing a poll the other day, or a chart the other day, that says right now Netflix is creating more original content than what was being created in Hollywood some 15 years ago.
Wow.
To give you an idea of that.
Wow.
So I mean, and that's just Netflix alone. So you're not counting all the other individual entities or groups that are out there. So I think at this point in time, the streaming industry does have a bright future. Although I think halfway through, we're going to start seeing some casualties.
Yep.
And I don't know which ones they will be per se, because a lot of them are backed by high end, like, whether it's NBC, Universal, Viacom, Netflix, Amazon, Apple, you name it. But one of these, or two of these, or even more of these individual companies, these streaming markets, are going to say, you know what, maybe this isn't the investment we wanted to go ahead and continue with.
They'll be consolidated and swallowed up by other companies, and because it's all about your catalog, man. That's why I don't know what Apple TV Plus is doing. I don't really understand. That was the most confusing, lackluster, or anything of any kind of release I've ever seen, and this is from Apple.
It's not. They've done something like this before. It's just when you come out half-hearted, they've done stuff like this before.
Yeah.
That when they really want to get behind something, they're virtually better than anyone else on the planet, because they have almost more funding than anyone else on the planet. But when you have, like you said, a half-hearted attempt like what they produce with Apple Plus, and outside of M. Night Shyamalan's new series, they've really not brought anything else new that's been really mentioned. That to me is disappointing for all those Apple Plus owners out there.
But look, if you buy a phone, you get it free for a year. So, what do they care? They sold you a phone. They don't care.
It might not be up for a year. That's the problem.
Yeah.
But leading into somewhere else, into another direction for pop culture, you have something else you want to talk about?
Yes, I do. This is near and dear to my heart. On our show, the Jock and Nerd podcast, we specifically talk about comic book and superhero TV and movies and pop culture. And just looking at the war between the MCU, Marvel, and DC Warner Brothers movies leading into the future. What a decade it's been for Marvel. Of course, undoubtedly. No one would doubt that. But we love the Marvel movies. We love the Marvel universe. But it's almost gotten to a place where you could say you kind of know what you're going to get. They've announced 4 movies a year for the next 3 years. That's 12 movies in 3 years, people. That's a lot of movies. And, Feige's saying with the Eternals, every movie is going to change everything, and you kind of have to say that with every movie. Now, DC, on the other hand, it's very interesting how they have ended this decade. They've kind of are starting to hit up. They're catching up. They're starting to fix the train wreck. They've had hits with Shazam. $2 billion movies very quickly with Aquaman and the Joker being R-rated, them taking that risk and it paying off way better than they expected. I think they just announced the Birds of Prey Margot Robbie's movie will also be R-rated. And this is the one thing they can do that Marvel cannot, is put out an R-rated superhero movie yet, until they do it. I feel like this is their edge. So, with the success of like Logan and Deadpool, I'm really interested to see where like this adult R-rated comic book movies go, and especially what DC, if they're going to do more spin-offs and do more adult natured stuff like that. That could be the thing to give them their spot, just as big as the MCU.
You're listening to the Pop Culture Cosmos. Don't touch that dial. Wait, do people still use dials?
You've heard others, but nothing could prepare you for the shameful stupidity that is the Jock and Nerd podcast. Hear Imran.
So if you offend everyone at once, it's a wash. I've covered everybody.
Anthony.
Sorry, I was texting. Say that again.
And Rug Boy.
Yeah, whenever there's a snowstorm, my Slack hole tightens up.
As they talk over one another.
Just exactly the same as
Terminator.
We're talking over each other. It's fine.
Sorry.
Swear and ask you for money.
Just give us the money.
The Jock and Nerd podcast.
It's campy, silly, goofy fun.
Jock
and Nerd.
And that's the thing I wanted to ask you, because like you exactly hit it right on the head. DC at the tail end of this decade started to get things right. It's something that both your show and my show has repeatedly been, just negative on, is the way Warner Brothers and DC handled its business over the course of the past few years. But finally, they're starting to see the light as far as how to go about doing things in a superhero universe. But now you have a tenuous point in time where the tide and momentum can shift radically. I mean, Marvel, as you said, it explained all this as far as not only 12 films, but integrating the television series within Disney Plus as well, which is a very novel idea, which is extremely, intelligent, on the surface, but is it going to pay off? And with the names and the movies that are coming out, at least in the short term, in the front part of the first part of the decade for Marvel, some of those are big risks. And some of those are, with the Eternals and Shang-Chi, I personally am excited to see a Kung Fu movie that will be on the scale of what it is. But again, it's a big financial risk. Also, as well, the Eternals. We talked about before, I'm sure I know on your show and my show about the Eternals and the familiarity of getting people to know the generic audience at large out there, how to go ahead and understand what are the Eternals. I mean, it worked for them one time with Guardians of the Galaxy.
Yep.
Will it work again? So there's some big risks that Marvel are taking on the front side of the decade, whereas DC is going to hit you up with the Wonder Woman 84. It's going to hit you, like you said, with the Shazam 2 coming up here in the near future. Black Adam, even though that's not as familiar, it has Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson behind it. There are more familiar names. Obviously, the Batman as well. That's going to be revamped with Robert Pattinson. So there's safer bets on the DC side, at least in the short term. So I'm interested to see how that affects the long term. And that's one thing I wanted to ask you is, how is this going to transition forward into the decade for both Marvel and DC?
That's a good question. And it kind of segues into my next thing that I wanted to look forward to. But God, you're absolutely right. I feel like DC next year has won the game by just landing The Rock. Like, you get The Rock on your side, ding, 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 you got points. But this is where DC movies are at their evolution. It took them these last 7 years to figure it out, to finally shake loose everything Zack Snyder was trying to do and figure out what they want to do. Now, what I like that Marvel's doing is, yes, it's risky. They're smaller movies, but my next point was, this is going to sound funny looking at me, but I'm excited to see more brown people in movies and TV. Let me explain myself. I'm actually Pakistani American, born to immigrant parents. And I look, if you're watching the video, yes, I'm completely white, but it's because I have vitiligo. It's a skin disorder that, destroys your melanin. I've had it since I was a kid. So it's confusing. Yes. And it confuses a lot of people. It's a lot of fun to play with. But just like I said, Marvel, Kumail Nanjiani had just got jacked. He's got a role in Eternals, and I was like, oh my god, look at Kumail. They're doing Miss Marvel on Disney Plus. Do you realize how ecstatic that makes me when I discovered this book? This is about a teenage Muslim American born to Pakistani immigrant parents in high school who gets powers. Now, I am also a Pakistani American who was raised in Chicago to immigrant parents, and in high school, I wish I had powers. I didn't have any powers, but if I did, I would be Miss Marvel. That's what I tell everyone. I'm Miss Marvel. So to see that on TV and to have kids and little girls like look up to that and want to be that. There's another great show, Rami, on Hulu. I don't know if you've seen it, about Rami Youssef. He's an Egyptian American Muslim comic, and the show is phenomenal. So I'm just excited for you got Hassan Minhaj, you got a bunch of brown people on TV and movies doing great stuff. That always makes me happy.
And that's something we saw more of at the latter half of this past decade was representation and more diversity in Hollywood, especially when it comes to the big blockbusters.
Yep.
And the old ways of, even when I was working in Hollywood in the 90s, and you had those old ideals that, a woman or a person of different ethnicity could go ahead and be a star unless it was a certain type of star. And that, to me, those ideals were just bad then. And now they're fading away, and you see these great pictures like Black Panther. Yeah. With all due respect to Terry Gilliam, is an outstanding film.
Gilliam is just look. You ask old white guys what they think about the Marvel movies. What do you think they're gonna say?
Get off my lawn.
Yeah, who's surprised by this?
Exactly. Well, just try and make a Brazil too. How about that?
Yeah.
But anyways,
but in 2020. There's going to be 4 giant tentpole blockbusters, superhero movies directed by women. 4 of them. That's unbelievable. Like I'm really like, and if those movies make money and they're good, like this is it's a huge shift, in Hollywood, and people are getting it. There's, I wanted to see myself represented on screen, and now I'm starting to see that, and it's amazing.
And that's awesome. And that's what I spoke to individuals all across the board in the latter half of this past decade was the fact that, they were identifying more with what was on screen. And for them, it was beautiful to watch. And for them, it was a moment. And that, to me, came across so well, to seeing so many positives come out of it. That's what I'm hoping for in this next decade, that we can go ahead and break more barriers and go ahead and by the end of the decade, get to the point where we're just all superheroes.
Yeah.
All these, doesn't matter what background, doesn't matter what type of ethnicity or male or female, that they're just superheroes that are there to go ahead and entertain us. And we could go ahead, no matter what type of background they are, we could just go ahead and follow them to the T. And if it's a good movie, it's a good movie. And that's what I'm hoping for. And it's evolving into that, when I'm hoping it'll keep evolving further. But by the time the end of the decade hits, who do you think stands on top? Because we've heard so many rumors about the Secret Wars, and where does the X-Men fit in, and where does Fantastic Four fit in for Marvel? Plus with DC, Robert Pattinson, he's going to be the Batman for the rest of this decade, and where is the Justice League going to return at some point in time, and how is that DC storyline going to fit in? Where do you think the narrative is going to go as far as who will come out on top by the end of the decade? Just seeing the trends as it's starting right now.
That's a good one too. What happens on the Marvel side? Kevin Feige has now, with the acquisition of Fox, hundreds more new characters to play with. And yes, I think in the next 10 years, we will see the X-Men, we'll see Fantastic Four, and they'll probably be spread out. In whether it's bringing in the villain first, like a Doctor Doom, who definitely deserves to be in the MCU. He's like one of the most amazing badass villains they have, and he would be perfect to tie up a lot of things. So they have.
Let me ask you this: do you think he's an Ultron level Avengers baddie, or do you think he is a Thanos level Avengers baddie?
That is a good question.
I think he's more Ultron-ish, but that's just me.
I would say somewhere in between. I mean, he's, the fact that he's human, maybe gives him an edge over, an AI or an alien. But his level of manipulation and just charm and knowledge and smarts and knowledge that he could build. He's got Doombots, so he's like a little bit in the middle. He's like maybe if Thanos had a bunch of Doombots, that's what you're gonna get. That'd be crazy.
But getting back, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to on a sidetrack. But as far as what goes ahead for the future for both, and if you see one coming out on top.
So, like I said, Marvel's got a lot to play with. DC, on the other hand, it's they do this thing where they've announced 20 movies. None of them are ever going to get made, maybe, but they're still out there. They just put Flash back on the docket after it having 7 directors. But there's a great movie to be made there. I don't understand why it's so difficult. So once they get their head out of their butt and figure out what they're doing, once they get their act together, I think they have a potential of painting a really nice broad universe to give something for kids to something for adults and everywhere in between. Who comes out on top? It's so hard. I want to say Marvel just because of their track record and give them another 10 years. Like, what are they going to do to blow us away? Here's the wild card that I thought of, and it was actually another great segue into the last thing I wanted to talk about. Spider-Man's future at the moment, completely up in the air, right? We know he's got a little bit of time left with the MCU, and then he's got to go back to Sony. Does he go into these Venom movies? Do they make a spin-off? Does Sony actually do something right and create an amazing shared universe that overtakes both DC and Marvel? Could that happen? Probably not, but the uncertainty and the potential for Spider-Man going forward. Now, they may also really screw the pooch and get me mad, because if you listen to my show, I got a Spider-Man huge thing behind me. One of my favorite, ever since I was a kid, when you were talking about we could be them, heroes can be us. That's why I fell in love with Peter Parker. I was a nerdy kid, and this nerdy kid gets powers. So who can't relate to that? So I think Spider-Man being the wild card is going to be very interesting. Does Kevin Feige renegotiate, get him back? Do they pull some other stunt and recast him? Does it get rebooted yet again 3 more times during the next decade? All possible. It's all possible.
My money's on the latter, knowing Sony.
Right.
I mean, just the thing is, the characters, you talk about, the characters within the Spider-Verse, but you also spoke of some of the characters like Flash, for instance. And I think it comes down to marketability. That's why Shazam might have not met, even though they're making a sequel, not met the financial windfall that they were hoping for at Warner Brothers DC. Is, do these characters portray themselves as big stars and marketable stars on a platform such as that? Is Flash someone who can generate $300, $400, $500, $600 million worldwide?
Wow.
And I'm not even saying $1 billion. Can he generate like middle tier, worldwide box office, profitable enough to get by and to continue the story? Will Shazam 2 do that? And the same thing goes for the Spider-Verse. Once you get past the Venoms and also as well the Sinister Six and the Spider-Mans, they've talked about a whole bunch of different characters that I don't think are really people the audience at large wants to see. And while hardcore individuals might want to see it, the thing that makes you money is when, the individuals at large that don't follow this on an everyday basis goes and see it. That's when you have a hit. So that's the thing long term is, which properties will stick with audiences and which ones won't.
So that's the one thing I am afraid of with Sony, and that's a great point. You're starting to get to the thing where they're making these spin-off movies of these movies without the character in the movie that everyone loves. So are people going to go see like a Silver Sable and Black Cat and without Spider-Man? Doubtful at all centers from Spider-Man. So they have to somehow...
Kraven the Hunter movie. Would you watch a Kraven the Hunter movie?
Without Spider-Man? Now, here's the thing. I said that about Venom before it came out. And yeah, Venom, not the greatest movie, but they pulled it off, surprisingly. But now, if Sony can get Spider-Man back and you're going to do Carnage, you're going to do Venom, throw Spider-Man in there. Also, I've also had this idea. Sony just recast an adult Spider-Man at a different part of his life. And that's the Sony Spider-Man. Meanwhile, you can let young Tom Holland be the teenage Spider-Man over here. It might be a little confusing for the casual viewer, but everybody can have their Spider-Man and have their Spider-Man.
Well, it's all in the Spider-Verse.
Yeah, there's multiple Spider-Verses. So I hope DC doesn't go crazy and start doing that. Like, let's give Lex Luthor an R-rated movie and Sinestro and every major villain. We have Bane an R-rated movie. That's not maybe the correct play. You got to look at what made Joker so popular, and it largely was the name. So I don't know if they could find another character as big as Joker, because again, they pulled it off. They pulled off like a Gotham TV level stunt to put a Joker movie without Batman, and to make $1 billion. They deserved it. It's an amazing movie. It's crazy.
It is, and I'm hopeful that Warner Brothers will keep everything on track when it comes to DC, although I'm not 100% confident like I am with Sony. I'm not 100% confident in their ability either. That's why I was sad with Justice League, because the potential of what could have been if the movie had been good, or Zack Snyder's cut, or whatever you want to say. And I was hoping for, like I watched on Saturday mornings when I was a kid, the battles in the Justice League as far as the Hall of Villains versus the Hall of Good, and battling back and forth. I was hoping for that as a cataclysmic event, to culminate everything, like let's say around 2023, 24, 25, where you would have that. And unfortunately, we may never get it because of what's going on. Who knows what Warner Brothers is going to plan out as far as a consistent timeline, or if they want to, or they're just going to go scattershot like they do, because scattershot for them is working right now.
The single solo character movies have kind of been the most successful. They didn't have a plan. There's so many variables. I really want a behind the scenes documentary of like Zack Snyder's DC, like everything from Man of Steel up to making Justice League. The backstory is so interesting and almost more entertaining than the movies, especially in Justice League. That backstory, that movie. So it's hard to know what could have been because of so many things. His personal tragedy in his life, had that not happened, what would have happened? And Henry Cavill not taking the role, and for Mission Impossible, and had to grow a mustache. If they just let him keep the mustache and added a beard, there's so many things. Like, they could have fixed it so many ways, and yet that's what you did.
Yes, you could have.
You're listening to the Pop Culture Cosmos.
And what is really bad about this is, if they have this gold mine in Zack Snyder's vaunted Justice League cut, and the thing is, if they keep it on the shelf, or would you do what I would do, is you have this little HBO Max thing like you spoke about earlier in the show.
Yep.
First day, put it right on there. Boom. You've got people.
Yeah, you want people to sign up. They've still said that they have no intention of releasing it. Zack Snyder is still posting photos of his Vero account. Some of them quite dubious. We talked about the show. I'm like, is this a Photoshop black costume, Zack Snyder? What are you doing? But like, there's film canisters, and he's like, here it is. I'm like, how do I know what's in the canister? It's a nice picture, Zach. But you want people to sign up. You're absolutely right. But you'd have to I don't think there's a finished movie. I think you'd have to put a lot of money in there to finish that movie. It just astounds me that Warner Brothers has the most iconic characters of history on the planet, and they put them in one movie, and that's the best you could do. Like, you blew that. How could you blow that? This is Batman and Superman, Wonder Woman. How can you mess it up that badly? Jeez, Wonder Woman's great now.
And Wonder Woman's great. Wonder Woman 84 coming up next year. Everybody's excited for it.
Fun. Yeah.
And I agree with you. I think the safe money is still with Marvel by the end of the decade. But you never know. If DC continues on its path that is going on right now, we could see a shift even more towards the DC side. But for right now, I'm just going to go with you and your advice and your wise pop culture knowledge, and say, I think at the end of the day, when it comes down to 2029 and all that, we're still going to see Marvel. And because Marvel seems to have something together. I mean, Kevin Feige seems to have all this going on where he has a plan and he knows where he wants to take it. And he's already mapped out to 2030. And that, to me, is something that I think DC and Warner Brothers has not actually come to grips with as of yet.
Let me ask you something. Do you think the bubble is going to burst? I mean, we're talking 10 years, but another 10 years, is there even an MCU anymore? Is the whole thing collapsed? I don't know.
I still think there's an MCU. I still think there's a long-term goal, because if it ain't broken, don't fix it.
You got to keep people still interested, though. You need to switch it up enough.
That's why they have the X-Men.
Yeah.
And we're assuming that the X-Men are going to be good guys and all that. It may not happen at first. It may, there's Secret Wars. There's so many different plot lines from the comic books they could use that could go ahead and be the basis for something special within the Marvel Cinematic Universe, just like you've mentioned with Spider-Man and also as well with the DC. There's so many things to draw from without having to go and be 100% original and take a risk there. So I think at this point in time, I'd still go ahead and say Marvel at this point in time is where I would lean my money towards. But you're right. they are taking some big risks in the front part of this decade. But again, it could recoup the benefits of that later on in the middle part, or as we see Blade Reborn also as well. Like I said, a new Fantastic Four movie is most likely on the way. How are the X-Men going to be integrated? There's so many other different variables that could be done with Marvel, and not including the Disney Plus shows that they could go ahead and keep integrating with throughout the rest of the decade. So I probably have to say at this point in time, I'm leaning with Marvel for the rest of this decade.
But is it going to be too much for people? I'm wondering, is interest going to wane? These franchises have kind of destroyed movie theaters right now. If you look at a movie theater, you can't see anything that's not going to be a blockbuster hit. Is that the same 10 years from now? What does the movie theater look like?
Well, that's true. And that could be a point indeed, because the box office overall, as far as the marketplace, is declining.
Yeah.
And people are only going out for select events like this past recent in December here with Star Wars Rise of Skywalker. And they are being more selective about what people want to go ahead and see. And we are seeing that. So taste could change. And as the experience gets more and more expensive to go to the theaters, it could get more reasonable, and more people going back to just streaming. I'll wait for it on Blu-ray, I'll wait for it on DVD, I'll wait for it for streaming or other means by the end of this decade. That could happen. I mean, we don't even know what's going to happen as far as technology. There could be some advancement, or it could be something like streaming that was in its infancy at 2010 that could actually evolve and become something special by the end of this decade that could make it even more viable, and also as well make it less viable for people to go to the movie theaters as well. So there's a whole bunch of things in there. And I think you're right. There's also, when it comes to the superhero movies, people can get burned out. We're starting to see it with the Star Wars franchise.
Yeah.
And that's something that I want to go ahead into before we go ahead and end our conversation today, because I want to talk to you at length in regards to Star Wars. You mentioned Kevin Feige, and Kevin Feige is given a lot of credit, and deservedly so, as far as how he shaped the superhero narrative in the past decade. But coming up in this decade, yes, we're all thinking that Kevin Feige is going to be a major part of that. He may have that mapped out and may hop over to the Star Wars universe, because we know he's going to be a producer to one film. Do you think he's going to have to go ahead and get himself more involved with the Star Wars universe after seeing what's gone on with both The Last Jedi and its divisiveness amongst fans, not critics, but fans, and in this case, Star Wars Rise of Skywalker, which is divisive with pretty much everybody right now that's seen it?
In my opinion, they absolutely need Kevin Feige's assistance over there. Look, I don't understand how you announce we're making the last 3 chapters of this beloved 40-year-old franchise, and you didn't have a plan for the 3 movies. You're making stuff up as you go. This is unacceptable. What are you doing? Kevin Feige, also a Star Wars fan, and I think he is smart enough to know that Star Wars is not Marvel. You can't do Star Wars tried it. We're going to give you one thing every year.
Wouldn't it be funny though if Mace Windu just ended up, after screen credits, I'm back. Bring
them all back.
I'm bringing a team. I'm getting a team together.
That's what. But I think that's now that we got this Skywalker saga out of the way, it's done. I think they don't need to be hampered by trilogies. I think, give me stuff like Rogue One, Mandalorian. That's my flavor of Star Wars that I love. And I think those have been the most successful. I'm surprised that I wasn't the biggest of fans of this new trilogy, and I can see what they were doing, but man, it's hard. The way you set up that first movie and then reset up in a second movie, you can't finish all that in just a third movie. It's impossible. And he tried, and it's kind of a hot mess. So it's done. Let's move on. We got Babu Frick, who I think should dethrone Baby Yoda as the cutest Star Wars thing, because I loved him in the movie. But Feige is a smart, and he is a fan. And I think with, he has relationships with Jon Favreau already. Dave Filoni is a very important piece of this puzzle. They've got him in now on the live action side. Dude, just ask Dave Filoni to consult on everything. That guy knows good Star Wars. Everything he's done feels like Star Wars. So I'm hopeful, despite how this whole thing played out. The fact that they gave us this Mandalorian and Rogue One the way it was, I'm hopeful that there's still magic in there.
And that's and that's something I want to ask you is that, right now, the only thing that's been confirmed is that Rian Johnson is still working on something within the Star Wars universe, and that Kevin Feige is going to produce something in the Star Wars universe.
Yeah.
And that to me is a little bit suspect right there for you, because the Game of Thrones writers said, hasta la vista, and said, you'll see you later. I think there still needs to be more to be done. I still think there needs to be, like you said, fresh eyes on this, on the Star Wars universe, to create fresh new projects that are out there. I don't see anything coming as far as for the big screen for another 3-4 years.
And they shouldn't be. Just let it rest.
Yeah, Disney has clearly stated that that's what they want to go ahead and do. But again, it all comes down to a $4 billion investment in Star Wars, $4 billion investment in Marvel. Right now, they've already got everything back from Marvel. Star Wars is still suspect on their investment, so I know they want to go ahead and pay off it at some point in time. So like I said, it's going to be a movie, they've said, within maybe, 3, 4, 5 years at some point in time. But when you see that happening, who do you think it's going to come from? Is it going to come from Rian Johnson, Kevin Feige, or someone else?
It's going to be interesting to see how Kevin Feige and Kathleen Kennedy get along, because I know she's not going to work for him, and he probably doesn't want to work. Like, it's going to have to be two side to side, and if they can make that work, that's going to be a big part of it. It's, she's going to push back on his ideas, and I'm sure he'll have great ideas. I think they need to let it rest. Super excited for Ewan McGregor coming back on TV as Obi-Wan. That's a great move. Smart stuff like that. And Cassian Andor, it could sound cool. Problem is, we know what happens we know he's not going to die in the TV show, people. He's going to survive all this. So I don't know what the point. Are there stakes in this? I do like Diego Luna, and it's a great movie. So it's I think hopefully it should be Feige. I don't know why they let Rian Johnson just do whatever he wanted. Kathleen Kennedy fires almost everyone else, and she just let Rian Johnson go ahead, do whatever you want. It's cool. Okay.
And he did. And basically, J.J. Abrams retconned the retcon that he retconned off of J.J. Abrams.
Makes your head spin.
It does. And, regardless of everybody's opinions out there of Rise of Skywalker, there's still a lot of things that can be done within the Star Wars universe in the next decade. So I'm hopeful, like you said, for some great things going on there. But I just want to ask this as we touch on something else after Star Wars. I mean, do you think Star Wars can be as viable a property as it once was, as vaunted or as special basically as it is to us?
Yeah.
Can it be special once again to a younger audience or younger audiences? Because I'm beginning to see more and more apathy towards the Star Wars universe as these new releases get more and more, I guess, mediocre to disappointing. And you're just seeing the results of that. I mean, everybody's going Baby Yoda, but that's still, in essence, still a TV show. You can only do so much and expand so much with a TV show.
Yeah.
It's ultimately what happens on the big screen that can take the Star Wars universe back to a realm where it was once before.
I feel like they've still gotten to the kids, the younger kids, the toy buying audience. I see little girls dressed up as Rey and a bunch of the characters. So you're going to have that generation who just love this because of the age they were. Similar to how the kids growing up with the prequels kind of, that became their Star Wars. So there's always that generation at that age. This is your Star Wars. Now they just have to, the other thing that I think makes it special is really the absence of Star Wars things. You got to let it breathe. You got to take it away and then give us something really good and then take it away. Now, with the Marvel comics they've been putting out have been fantastic. But of course, I don't think a lot of people read the comics. Jedi Fallen Order is one of the first games in years that I actually finished. I haven't finished a game in years, and the story completely enthralled me. That's in canon. You got that awesome character and a bunch of characters in there. I would love to see adventures about them. And, just give me, now that the Skywalker saga is over, I just need parallel adventures where occasionally they bump into stuff that happened in the main saga, because it shouldn't be about Skywalker, but it's always kind of going to be around this whole story, starting, with Phantom Menace to Rise of Skywalker. But just show me parallel things on the side, kind of like what The Mandalorian is doing, kind of like what Rogue One did.
And Battlefront 2 is now at the point now
Well, they added the Rise. Yeah.
Yeah. They added all the stuff in there and all the DLC, and they took away a lot of the microtransactions. They took away a lot of the other stuff that got everybody in an uproar. And now it's the game it should have been 2 years ago. But yeah.
Finally. I also think the theme parks, what Disney is doing with this, their mastery of animatronics and digital technology. Some of the videos I've seen of this Rise of the Resistance ride is unbelievable. I'm like, you were in a Star Destroyer. Like, how are they doing this? Like, it looks so real and it looks so immersive. The tech is there, so I think the rides are going to help push them into the next decade and keep them in the spotlight.
I hope it does.
If you need your video game fix, be sure to check out Retro City Games. Located in Town Square on Las Vegas Boulevard or in Henderson, Nevada, Retro City Games has the cure for all your video game vices. Retro games and games for current consoles, Nintendo, Sega, PlayStation, Xbox, and more. Retro City Games has all the staples from any library and some highly collectible offerings too. So pick up a few games today at Retro City Games in Town Square on Las Vegas Boulevard or in Henderson, Nevada. Retro City Games is your video game metropolis.
Once again, I'm speaking to Imran Javed of the Jock and Nerd podcast. You can catch it today everywhere you get your podcast. And I mean it. You need to get it because it is an outstanding show indeed. Very funny, always current, and it's just a great to listen to every time I listen to it. It is well, what can I say?
Oh,
it is the Jock. It's the Jock and Nerd podcast today. You can find it wherever you get your podcasts. But you mentioned video games. You mentioned other pop culture entertainment that you and I both delve into on quite occasion. I want to know your thoughts on with a new Xbox coming around, Xbox Series X, which looks like my subwoofer.
Well, yeah, it's giant, right? It's like a big computer almost.
So I want to know where your thoughts on the video game industry, where it goes. And do you think PlayStation will still maintain its dominance like it did in this current generation?
I'm not a huge gamer. I was back in the day. You know how you go through stages? Like, I was the guy that was I would buy everything Nintendo put out for a long time. But I had an Odyssey 2000. I don't know if you heard about the Odyssey. I had two versions. One that just had dials for Pong. One that had the thing you snapped on. It was extra and it would talk. Like, you could type out and the computer would talk. And then I had the original Nintendo, Sega. I kind of dropped out after the first Xbox. And then I came back in with the PS4 because of Spider-Man, because I kept hearing about this game. And, because of my podcast, the most amazing thing happened. A listener, I'm not kidding you, everyone needs an Uber listener. A listener got me a PlayStation and the Spider-Man game. And He's one of our patrons. He's one of our top patrons, one of our best listeners. And I couldn't be more thankful. It blew me away. So I've been loving that Spider-Man game. But it's funny you mentioned VR because that's what I was going to get the Sony PSVR. I felt like this is the future. I go to these comic book conventions and there's always a VR setup. And there's always like people playing the VR games. And they look like a lot of fun. And, with PlayStation VR being so affordable, I was surprised at how kind of affordable and plug and play it is. This could be some kind of Black Mirror. It's like the next Black Mirror thing where you're in the game.
Bandersnatch.
Bandersnatch, or that one where they're in the fighting game. That was did not think it would go that way. But I was thinking VR, fully immersive VR, is eventually going to get better and smaller and lighter. But Gerald, you're saying the problem is that maybe the headsets are a little bulky. Maybe it's a little hard to get into.
It is because it's intimidating, I think, to the general user at large. And I think that's why it hasn't really sold the way it has, or the way it should be, or the way it needs to in order to become a definitive part of this marketplace. Plus, some of the other units that are not PlayStation VR, they're still high priced. I mean, you've got Valve still at $400, $500, $600 for its units, and you've got other ones that are right around that same price that nobody's really going to invest into because they want affordability and value for their money. And there's still the stigma of, I'm going to get a headache after a point of time, or I'm still going to get motion sickness. All these stigmas are still attached to VR. I think it's going to be hard, or I'm not going to say it's impossible, but I think it needs to be repackaged in a way that people need to go ahead and be more into it. I think that augmented reality, and this is something I remarked, way back when I was covering CESs every year, and I still am, and I'm fortunate to do so, that Microsoft had something where you would walk into a room and it would go ahead and just basically you could shape it the way you want to. Like you would go into
like a holodeck on Star Trek.
Holodeck. Yeah, like a holodeck. Yeah, they had something like a prototype of that they were playing with, and they just did it right, cut it right there.
So no glasses needed.
No glasses needed. You would just walk into it, and it's be something like that. And they've toyed with it before, and they've actually shown it off at E3. But it's something that I think that is still on the way. I mean, there's barriers to reason why they can't go ahead and mass market such a product. But I think that's the future. If you wanted to go ahead and invest in some type of reality, I think that's where it has to go, because like you said, you have to put on the glasses, you have to get the earphones, you have to, do I need controllers, the whole 9 yards. So the immersiveness, while you think you have it, it's still, you're asking somebody, am I got this right? If I got this right. So I think something more immersive in a beneficial way without all the devices may be the way to go, and probably won't see it till at the very least the end of this decade.
I wonder if we ever do you think we'll ever get to 3D movies that don't require any kind of glasses?
I believe we will. I know they've tried to go ahead and show that off at, you see all this stuff at CES from time to time, prototypes and whatnot. Some of it works, some of it doesn't. And I think at some point in time, you will see something mass marketed that will try to recreate a 3D. But again, 3D, is that going to sell? Is that something, it's something that people liked it as a niche, but not everybody seems to enjoy it.
So with AR, do you mean, like, I've noticed that in the App Store, they got those new AR games, right? Where you pointed at a surface and there's a whole tank battle going on. It looks amazing. It's just like the holograms from like the Star Wars hologram game. More stuff like that just requires a screen. You just really need a screen to look through.
That's what I'm talking about. Yeah, or you enter an area where you've got screens all around your side.
Projecting. Yes. Wow. Yeah, that sounds like fun. That's a lot better. Yeah, the VR is it's got to be super easy to get into and actually feel like you're there, without wearing anything. That's amazing. I want to see that. Where is that?
I don't know, but if you and I could patent it, we'd make it $1 billion. I tell you right now. And if we could sell it at an affordable price. But I think that's also probably the catch-22 there is, can you get people to go ahead and buy into it? And with as you and I know, when the first thing that it comes down to when people make these decisions, it's ultimately price.
Yeah, I still want that PlayStation VR because I watched a bunch of videos and I was, it's kind of interesting how PlayStation's move was making it lightweight, less expensive, easy to use. And I'm like, wow, I just need this in the camera. I'm kind of in there. Now they mentioned there's a lot of cords and there's several cords. The headset itself needs a power supply. Then you got to plug several things into the computer, coming back out. I was like, wow, okay, that's a lot of cables. So when you're moving around, you're feeling cables. I don't know, but I kind of want to be able to sit on my couch and just play a platform game and be looking around and around stuff, sitting there. Like, the idea, that's really cool. I have not yet tried it, but I can't pull the trigger quite for the bundle. So I don't know.
Or go for the Darth Vader game or Skyrim.
There's going to be an Iron Man game. There's a Batman game where you're Batman and you go into the cave. So would you recommend that, at least PlayStation VR?
I would. Yeah. I mean, because it's an easy price point to get into. I mean, I've seen as low as $199 for a package deal.
Yeah.
So I think that's with 5 games. That was sold over the holidays as a package price at $199. And I imagine you probably go ahead, if you're able to search around or whatnot, you may still be able to find it at that price because, these retailers want to get rid of stuff that didn't sell over the holidays. But I think it is something that if people are interested in get to as a test, they should invest in that over maybe something much more expensive that they may not be happy with.
I mean, at that point, that's great. But I know ultimately it's going to be another gimmicky thing that will join my PlayStation Wii board and my Dance Dance Revolution pads and my Guitar Hero guitars in the closet, and I never play again. That's what I'm afraid of.
One of my friends, and actually also is a sponsor of the show, Retro City Games, you go in their stores, especially their store here in a suburb of Las Vegas in Henderson, and you could see at times a stack of the Wii fitness boards.
Yes.
Just right there. Yes.
Nobody wants those.
Almost as tall as me at 6'2". So it's so funny to see.
At the time, it seemed like I could do push-ups on these. I'll step up and down with the little me. And then after 2 days, I'm like, what am I doing? Just put it away. Used to love Dance Revolution. You want to work out? That is a legit workout. You could lose hundreds of pounds sweating on that. I have like 4 pads, but even that, after a while, you're like, I fell for this gimmick. Oh well.
They're right alongside all the Guitar Hero and Rock Band guitar.
And the Rock Band kids, yes.
Exactly.
If it wasn't for Rock Band Mike, many people wouldn't have started a podcast. So there's always that.
This is true. And I'm so glad for that, because without it, we wouldn't even be here today. Your show wouldn't be around. My shows wouldn't be around. So it's definitely great to see and also hear as well. But before we go ahead, and I want to hear more from you about the Jock and Nerd podcast. I want to hear any last thoughts on the decade ahead for pop culture. Some things you're excited about, from wherever it is.
Oh boy. I mean, there's a lot that, I'm mumbling. I don't really know where to go. I'm thinking about like my comic book, actual print comic books, and the kind of up and down sales they've seen in the past. And now the fact that Kevin Feige like controls even like the comic book publishing end, he controls everything. I'm always like, will print books be a thing of the past at some point? I have the DC Universe app, and I kind of sometimes pull it up and I'll read comic books on my TV, which is kind of cool. And on an iPad with the backlit, it's a great experience. The problem for me is they are $4 a pop now, making it really hard to keep up week to week with things. So I wonder what mediums will die off. Finally, will go the way of the 8-track or cassettes. Man, these kids don't even know what VHS tapes are anymore.
Nope. Or Betamax or anything of that nature. I mean, magazines, newspapers, comic books, anything at that time, and books, like you mentioned, all those are in jeopardy of, by the end of this decade, having real issues, as we've seen already in the past decade, that the industries for each of them have gone down. A number of magazines have folded, a number of newspapers have closed, and we've seen this trend continue, and I think we will. And retailers as a whole. I mean, everybody was saddened with Toys R Us and how that, and Blockbuster and all these other entities that were so familiar to us in previous decades. Those entities will probably even more so in the future. Those memories and those retailers that brought us so many good things in our lives, those will be going by the wayside by the end of the decade as well.
I feel like you got to cherish your physical media right now while you can, and treat it well and display it. Because one day a kid's going to come up there and point to a comic book and be like, they printed those on paper? That's weird. Why would they do that?
Exactly. What's that?
Yes. I mean, I showed a VHS tape to some, and they're like, what's that black rectangle with the white circles in it? I'm like, you're kidding me, right? Man. But we don't need them. Of course, I think, I work with computers and design, storage media constantly changing. We have archive files on, like jazz drives and zip drives and formats that I can't even get to. So who knows? Everything is just more digital, obviously, leaving us to be more tied to our desktops and our computers and our screens. Not going outside.
Nope, not going outside at all. We're all going to need a tan at some point in time.
Yeah.
But I'll tell you what, it's great to speak to you again. It is Imran Javed from the Jock and Nerd podcast. But before we head on out, my friend, I've said great things about the show. But you got to go ahead and tell everybody out there why everybody needs to check out your awesome show, the Jock and Nerd podcast.
I'll try to say great things. Thank you, Gerald, for having me. This is a blast. You are a man of my heart. We love talking about the same stuff. Listener, just visit jockandnerd.com, search Jock and Nerd podcast. The show consists of 3 hosts, me, Gen X, old school Gen Xer, a millennial and a grumpy old puppet named Rug Boy. Anthony is the jock, and Rug Boy is our color there. So, you may ask, why is there a puppet on a podcast? And I will ask you, why aren't there more puppets on podcasts? Let's not be feltist here. They have rights, they have feelings. But we love to discuss comic book, superhero TVs. We review TV series, superhero movies. We have a great series called WTF Happened, where a buddy of ours, Matt Delhauer, will take a look at a comic book bomb of a movie, and it's the most sarcastic audiobook you've ever heard, break down the movie, and then dive into what happened in this movie, why was it a bomb. and we do a lot of Patreon movie reviews in which our patrons will force us to watch anything, and I mean anything, and we have to watch and review it, oftentimes leading to some hilarious reviews. So we have new shows every Sunday, and you can find us wherever you can find podcasts. Gerald, thank you for having me. I'm honored to be on Pop Culture Cosmos.
Well, it's great to have you here. And like I said, this was way overdue, but we will make sure the next time it is a lot sooner than that, because it was awesome having you here describing your thoughts in the realm of pop culture coming up for the next decade. I mean, as a pop culture guru, it's just...
No.
Exactly.
We got to get you on our show too, Gerald. You will have a lot of fun.
I would indeed. I've heard the show, like I said, quite a few occasions, and I would love to be a part of it. And again, the door is always open for you here. I cannot thank you enough. And to you and your family, I want a blessed 2020 and also as well an incredible decade for you ahead, and also for the show as well.
Absolutely. Thank you. You too. #Pod and Family.
And once again, it is Imran Javed from the Jock and Nerd podcast. Catch it today wherever you can get your podcasts. It's just so great to have you here talking about the future of pop culture this decade right here on the Pop Culture Cosmos.
Everyone these days could use a little support, and your friends at the ESO Network are no different. With the ESO Network Patreon, the cool thing is when you help support us, it's you who will benefit. With 4 tiers starting for as little as 25 cents a week, you can listen to some of your favorite network podcasts early, hear exclusive content, maybe get some ESO swag, or even possibly take a shot at the geek seat. All you need to do is sign up at patreon.com/ESO Network.
You're listening to a Weeby Geeks Network podcast.
This has been a broadcast of the ESO Network. Be part of the crew and help support our shows by donating to our ESO Patreon or by shopping through Amazon.com or the TeePublic store, which can all be found at www.esonetwork.com. The ESO Network, your station for all things geek.
Tangent Bound Network. Let your voice be heard. TangentBoundNetwork.com.
Thanks so much for downloading the Pop Culture Cosmos, and stay tuned as more great podcasts are on the way. Thanks again for listening to us here at the Pop Culture Cosmos.